Non-essential travel. The impact of coronavirus on people's lifestyle in Australia. What is non-essential travel? The Australian Prime Minister said that people in Australia should stay at home. Holidays and avoidable interstate trips are non-essential in response to coronavirus. Australian government urges that all non-essential travel within Australia and overseas should be cancelled. Can I leave my home? The Australian Prime Minister requested Australians to stay at home unless their travel was essential. What businesses will be closed? The Australian Prime Minister announced a shutdown on public venues. The following businesses are to be closed as they are considered non-essential: pubs, clubs, cinemas, casinos, nightclubs, indoor places of worship, gyms, indoor sporting venues. What businesses will be left open? Under the lockdown, cafes and restaurants will be able to open but only to offer takeaway and delivery services. Hotels will be allowed to continue to open in an accommodation capacity. The following businesses are to be allowed to open as they are considered essential: supermarkets, banks, petrol stations, pharmacies, convenience stores, freight and logistics, food delivery, alcohol shops, hairdressers and beauticians. Who is going to stop me from leaving my home? Both state and federal governments have emergency powers to fine and even jail people who breach lockdown orders. The Australian government is forming police task forces to enforce social distancing rules. State governments have already been using police to check on people in isolation and have expanded police presence in affected areas in Australia. The Prime Minister said further restrictions would be considered if lockdown rules are not followed. Interstate or domestic travel. As the federal government increase its response to the coronavirus outbreak, new restrictions on domestic travel have been announced. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has said all non-essential travel within Australia should be cancelled to help stop the spread of COVID-19. Interstate or domestic travel over school holidays should be cancelled. Australian state borders have begun to close. All non-essential interstate or domestic travel by residents have been suspended immediately. The only interstate or domestic travel across Australia's state borders should be for work, for compassionate reasons and to ensure the essential supplies and services that the regions need. This means, no holidays interstate. No weekends interstate. No visiting family and friends interstate. If it is not essential, do not go outside. Only residents and essential service personnel are permitted to travel interstate. Residents returning to their state will have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. Australian state governments are shutting down interstate borders to everyone who is not entering the state for work, medical appointments or to deliver freight. All other visitors will be turned away as the states ramp up their response to the coronavirus outbreak. Border travel will be policed in an RBT style with officers stationed to determine who needs to cross and allowing them through quickly. Any visitor, excluding essential travellers or residents, will not be allowed to travel interstate. Travelling overseas. The Australian government is recommending Australians reconsider all non-essential overseas travel regardless of their age, health or destination. Around the world, more airlines are suspending flights and more airports are closing. All overseas travel should be postponed. Non-residents and non-citizens can no longer come to Australia under new restrictions put in place by the Australian government in responding to the coronavirus pandemic. Key points: Australia is experiencing widespread ongoing transmission of a respiratory illness caused by the novel, new coronavirus COVID-19. Travellers should avoid all non-essential travel to Australia. Older adults and people of any age with serious chronic medical conditions are at increased risk for severe disease. Avoid contact with sick people and wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. If soap and water are not readily available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. Travellers returning to Australia stay at home for 14 days after returning from travel, monitor your health, and practice social distancing.